Shut up and sit down.
By all means, go for it. Have fun. Just leave me alone.
People are coming together more and more and more and more as the government has been failing us more and more.
I'm against being shitty to people.
You can't research your way into understanding somebody.
One way or another, I'd rather have the fight now.
Welcome back to Fight for Liberty Live, everybody. Tonight's guest doesn't know too much about liberty because they're Canadian, but we'll see what they do have to say about some of what they're working on. Before we get into that, TomFor52.com is where you're going to find out about the most exciting candidate that we have in the Libertarian Party in the 22 election. He's running for New York State Senate. He's doing an awesome job. We just had a fantastic fundraiser for him Tuesday night with Spike Cohen and Cody Anderson and Dwayne Whitmer and a bunch of other rock stars from the New York Libertarian Party. So there's a link in the description to this video to donate. And also just go to TomFor52.com to find out more about what he stands for, find events, find out what he's got going on. He's a great dude. Also, we talk about it every show, but Nug of Knowledge, it's the best place to get your legal weed in all of the 50 states. If you want to just have a nice, compact little pen like this, get high, support the Liberty Movement and all of your friends here at Free Speech Media and Fight for Liberty, go to nugofknowledge.com, use promo code F4L to get 10% off your first order. And yeah, get high, fight the state all at the same time. What more could you want? But today's guest, he is the managing editor of Being Libertarian, the editor-in-chief of Think Liberty. He also worked with the Vermin Supreme Institute. He is an author, narrator, and podcaster. Mr. Killian Hobbs, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So I always like to start off with kind of like a testimonial. So I'm curious, when did you realize you were a libertarian?
Well, it's a funny story with that, actually. And everyone who knows me now and has heard me speak of anything about the government and my utter disdain for them, they'd be surprised to find that I was kind of like your stereotypical Canadian, as you mentioned with that, where I was really in favor of having the government take care of a whole bunch of different things, because I figured, okay, they're the entity, they're going to have the power to do it. They'll have the ability to hire the people smart enough to do this XYZ sort of thing. But what I found was, as I would run into different failings of the government, especially when you don't, you elect this party, they do these things okay, these things horrible. You elect this party, they do different things horrible, different things okay, back and forth, back and forth. I started to realize that no matter who you elect, there's things that they're going to be atrocious at, and that shouldn't be the case. So I started to dig in. I started to read up on it, started to talk with people with different views from, far left, far right, up, down, back and forth, so on and so forth. Really started to catch on to where I stood when I started reading into Hayek, Mises, Rothbard, even I think one of my favorites is Notes on Democracy. Is probably just one of my favorite books for that, just because of how scathing it is and how concretely it breaks down that no, this doesn't work. So it was just that kind of like, I've always had this aspect where if I believe two things and they don't jive with each other, then I know something's wrong and I need to solve that. I don't like having that imbalance myself. So once I turned that towards my view on politics, it became pretty clear there's no way to support, any of this really without lying to yourself. And that's kind of like, once I realized that, that's when I was like, okay, this is definitely the direction I'm heading in when it comes to just my view on this entire situation in general, socioeconomics, politics, et cetera, et cetera.
I love that. I feel like there's a big difference in, or not a big difference. That's not really the point I want to make here, but there's like two fashions of how you get involved with the movement, whether it's like you came to it through a person or through a like idea. And I know a lot of people who read their way into the liberty movement, and then I know a lot of other people that like saw Gary Johnson or Joe Jorgensen or Larry Sharp or a candidate, or even just like some person, like their county chair was at a thing and they met them and whatnot. And I've always found it kind of interesting, that little bit of dichotomy, and then we all still end up in the same place doing the same thing, and it's great. Just one more way of like diversity of tactics.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the big thing too, right? Because just as everybody has different ways that they learn, everyone has different ways that they think, and everyone has different ways of processing ideas and also coming up with ways to apply them if they decide to apply them at all. But that's a whole other story. So just really having those different tactics available and having, different avenues for people to be involved and being present in those spaces creates more and more opportunities for people to reach the same conclusions the rest of us have.
Yeah, 100%. So tell me a little bit about how you got involved originally with Being Libertarian.
Well, to explain that, I'd have to start off with how I got involved with Think Liberty.
Okay. You'll
so
switch up.
honestly,
that was going to be my next question.
Yeah,
so
yeah, it just kind of goes. The order was kind of a little bit backwards. So,
okay.
Oh, sorry, I see my camera just kind of bounced there. But I'm a boomer with tech half the time. It's bad. But so in effect, like it all started with really just getting into an argument with a guy by the name of Vinnie Marshall about IP. As strange as that sounds as background, because at the time I was still defending IP. I've definitely changed my tune on that, but I was used to be a big like, no, this is the one thing that artists need to get paid, like that whole thing. But so just talking to them, I got involved with a bunch of the people that are behind the scenes on Think Liberty, not just the kind of like the main people like Lonnie Dupree, Caitlin Clevin was involved. Definitely Vinnie Marshall, like I mentioned, like that. They were like the Matthew McGowan. There's a whole bunch of them that were like the main people for it, at least main ones that like put in the work to really make it a thing. But then there was also a whole bunch of the other people. Most of them had come out of a Facebook group. I think it was like the Gary Johnson Dank Meme Stash Escape Pod. It was like an escape pod for people that liked each other out of that group. But anyway, I got involved with a bunch of those people, and then they back when Think Liberty was still like most of that crew was still in with Dankertarians, I think it was called at the time, before they kind of split off and then ended up doing their own thing. They had brought me on to start doing like some writing stuff with them. Then after I started doing that, they're like, okay, no, we're doing this, and you know what, we want you to take over the journalism side. We want you to work on our website and start making stuff happen there. Okay, sure. I have no English degree or background in any of this. I'm just really good at arguing with people on the internet. This sounds like a great idea. I can argue with people, be pedantic, and call out spelling errors. This is awesome. This is a job for me. So I just jumped into it from there. Started running the bad arguments articles on the website. Then I started doing the editing, bringing writers together, kind of built up a team, then scaled the team down to get rid of the people that wanted to be involved but didn't want to actually do anything. So just kind of had a really nice, like, tight-knit team with them. So we kind of ran things like that with Think Liberty for about a year or so. Then we were approached by Being Libertarian to kind of do a bit of a merger at that point. So what they wanted was they wanted basically our like human resource side and some of the organizational stuff and processes we had in place, everything like that. So in exchange, they had the giant audience. So we just kind of ended up working together, and it became like a whole banner thing between us, a South African publication called Rational Standard, and then obviously Think Liberty was the third one there.
Nice.
So from there, I got involved with Being Libertarian, started working with the former editor-in-chief, Martin Van Staten, worked with a guy that's currently running it, Chip there, started working with him, and basically worked as managing editor there. One thing that has changed, not too long ago, but I'd actually taken over as the editor-in-chief on the Being Libertarian side now. So I'm full run for their website as well as their publishing house, Champion Books.
Nice.
Which I think we've got our fourth book in the works right now, which is good.
All right.
So,
we're definitely going to be talking about that a little bit later. And for those of you that don't know, that are maybe new to the liberty movement and new to the kind of internet shenanigans that is our wonderful group, these pages that he's talking about, these names that he's dropping are awesome. Like Dankertarians is like some OG like libertarian activism on Facebook. Yeah, you're throwing out some old school names there.
Oh yeah,
I love it.
I mean, that was back when the ANCAP v. Minarchist, the original Kyle Wagner group, like that was like a big thing before that went down like a year and a half ago. Same idea, same kind of groups of people, just same craziness overall, which is fun.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the Libertarian Party really is just a giant meme, and we've been that for a long time, and we should just embrace it more. That's why I love Spike Cohen so much. He's the most memeable person
great.
I've ever met. The more we just embrace that, the better.
You gotta love it when you've got the vice presidential candidate, and he's best known as someone else's husband.
He actually went on a rant about that the other day on one of my friend's shows. He was like, my whole personality is just being stripped away from me, and no one cares. I fucking love that guy.
They could take away his personality, but not his Waffle House.
Never. I wonder, I've yet to ask Tasha how she feels about Waffle House. That conversation has never came up.
I feel like that could be dangerous.
She doesn't like Waffle House. That's a marriage ender right there.
Right?
Oof. So tell me a little bit about what Being Libertarian actually does. I know that because they do a lot of different things, including like the publishing company that you mentioned, the various articles from sources all over. You guys had podcasts on and off. Like, tell everybody what you guys do.
Well, pretty much if it's media, we do it. So one of the main things that we do with just with Being Libertarian, obviously the meme page, like that's our Facebook page is obviously our number one thing. We're coming up on, I think we're coming up on 1 mil soon for total like likes and follow. We crossed the mill for followers, but we're getting there for likes. So pretty large audience that we deal with there, which is good. So a lot of reach just with the meme game and everything there. Obviously we have the website. Big thing with the website, and I always have like difficulty trying to explain this to people, is that the way that we run the website, or I guess the way I run the website now, is we treat it more like a platform than a specific like publication. So obviously like some websites, they're going to be publishing their own stuff where they have a very specific message. They have a very specific, this is the line that we are towing. Here's how it goes. The way that I like to do it on our website is people will send in guest articles, and we'll sometimes in the same week have 2 different guest articles that completely disagree with each other, and we'll publish both. So long as it's still being true to libertarian ideals, regardless of which school of libertarianism or which like specific view on liberty it takes, so long as it's a liberty focused opinion, we'll go ahead and publish it and platform it, assuming it's not like something stupid like, I believe in liberty, therefore we need to turn these 3 countries into a glass plane. Like, as long as it's not something stupid like that, then generally we'll give it a green light, go ahead, put it through, and just kind of treat it more like a platform for the voice, because we know we've got the reach to be able to put those voices and those ideas out there. We do have Champion Books, so it's kind of our publication house for actual books. Some people still read those, which is great.
Really?
So I know, right? Such a novel concept. that was
novel concept.
Wow. It's been rare since I've had a pun that was accidental. I usually go for them on purpose. Okay.
Puns are the superior form of comedy, and I will die on that hill.
100%. It's meta jokes. It's great. You tell a joke because it's not funny. People laugh because it's not funny, but it did everything a joke is supposed to. It's more cerebral that way. But I could literally do the next 4 hours of just me throwing bad dad jokes and puns that I've got memorized. It'd be a bad time.
Oh,
Or a great time, depending on how you look at it.
maybe the next time you come on, because
Yeah,
I
maybe
want to
next time
talk
it's
more
just-
about champion books.
Yeah, so we got a couple different books out there. We have Igniting Liberty, which was a collection of different essays on the liberty movement for just kind of like more of like an entry point for people. So still good like opinions and arguments for people that might already be familiar with the liberty movement. In other cases, it was good positions and arguments just for people kind of learning about it. So it was just designed to be like a liberty smorgasbord, if you will. So we had that book out. Second book was mine. So that was Bad Arguments, Guide to Logic Winning Debates, where I just kind of put a collection of different specific popular arguments in the social realm, political realm, liberty movement in general, and just break down why so many of these arguments and messaging is just bad, as well as explaining like how to actually have a proper argument with someone, how to be able to identify what your purpose with the argument is, how to actually be able to message it properly instead of it just being screaming into the void.
Right.
Third book we had was Sexual Liberty, which talks about liberty movement through the lens of like the sex workers and every issue that they face and some of the legal requirements, pros, cons.
Delta McCulley's book, right?
Yeah. So yeah, we've got that out there too. And then we've got a couple that are in the works. We haven't had finalized titles or anything like that. So we're still in the editing process before publication, but we're hoping to have at least one more book out before the year's out, and then probably another 2 to 3 slated for next year, which is good. On the media side, we were working with Eric July. We worked with him on some of the video content, and then obviously we have podcasts that go out. Podcast Network still kind of cross-connected between Think Liberty and Being Libertarian. Had a couple shows that were on there. Some of them fell off, but we're still working to kind of rebuild that and just get some people in-house that want to put out good content and just kind of get the message out through that avenue as well. And then again, on social media, we've got Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty much all the outreach that we got there. A big one that we are associated with, though, and one that I always love to call out whenever anyone asks me about being libertarian in general, is Voluntarism in Action. So that's actually a charity that we're associated with, that we help out with there. So far, they've raised, I believe they've crossed the 200,000 threshold for money raised for different just individual charity. So it's not like a big like United Way sort of thing where people just kind of throw money in a pot and then the pot gets distributed after X money is taken out for bureaucracy or whatever else. It's straight money in, money out, usually through GoFundMes and different things like that for specific causes that come to our attention. So there's a lot of good work that's still happening with there. If you're looking for a way to do, some direct action like that, that's a great way to reach out and help. At least if you got this cash to spare, of course.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love seeing how good the liberty movement has been lately on that proving that voluntarism works, because so many people criticize us as like this heartless, selfish, the poor and the disabled should die because they can't produce for the that all the kind of Randian of like super capitalist rhetoric that you do hear sometimes, but is not the majority of the Libertarian Party. And it's nice when I see like fundraisers and different things like that just doing so well. Like the Liberty Memes $5 donation club or whatever has been raising money for random things almost every month for how many years now? Like
they've been doing it for like 2 or 3 at least.
Yeah.
They've been doing it for a while.
So big shout out to them too, because they've done some amazing work. I very much it's a big white pill to see, and then we get to show that to people and be like, see, there are people in our movement with needs, and then we help them, and we don't need the government to help them because the government didn't help them or refused to help them. We're paying all of this money in taxes, and they still couldn't keep these people alive. They needed us, and we did it because that's who we are as a movement.
You see, that's the thing too that I find that because obviously, once you're in the libertarian sphere, especially if you don't completely deep dive into it if you still are, relatively aware of a lot of the other, circles of thought. You talk to other people, different ideologies, different things like that. I mean, I've come across a lot of people in the liberty movement that pretty much exclusively talk to liberty movement people. They just don't talk about these concepts to anyone outside of the movement. But what I find is when you're talking about libertarianism or anything like that, eventually you're going to have, like you mentioned, the let the disabled die. You're going to have those conversations thrown at you because there is someone out there that did say that at some time. What I find though is that it's almost always said by LARPers. Realistically, it's only ever said by people whose entire presence in the liberty movement in general, not even just libertarianism, but in just liberty as a whole, their entire presence is talking smack on social media, and that's literally it. They have no presence outside of that. And 9 times out of 10, you give those people 6 months and they go back to the GOP, and then you don't have to worry about them again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not the doers. 100%.
Exactly. Yeah, they're the people that actually step up and do things and are involved. They're usually some of the nicest people. Sometimes they could get a little high strung. There's always 1 or 2 of them out there, but more often than not, the people that are actually involved in trying to do something and trying to make a difference, they're super sociable. They're able to communicate what they believe in. They're able to have a conversation. They're able to understand people who don't agree with them and respond civilly and realize this conversation is an opportunity to change your mind, not an opportunity to make you think that libertarians are like capitalist worshipping basement dwellers. Like a lot of people seem to have that mental image of libertarians.
Yeah,
it's that opportunity to be able to fix that and fix that public image that's been kind of just painted over us as those select few do.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there that think that this is like a lost cause, that too many people think of us like that, and that we have to constantly be fighting back against that narrative. I highly disagree. I'd say 90% of the country has never fucking heard of us. They don't even have that negative image. We're still, in a good way, irrelevant enough to where that terrible past, I don't think has damaged us to the level that we think it has.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that problem is because we are
in our circles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just saying, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just saying it's like that in our circles only, right? Where, we see our own people doing that, but then we have to realize that the people that we're hearing that from, are they really getting out there and being seen that often? They might have a couple quips taken for some salon article taking down some libertarian opinion online. Mm-hmm. But it's like the, I think one of the worst ones I ever saw for it was someone arguing against seatbelt laws. And they tried to, and again, it's your property, you shouldn't have to wear them, et cetera, that, that just makes sense. But they were arguing against it by trying to compare it to basically just having a gun put in your mouth if you don't do exactly what you're told by the government. It's okay, listen, pick your battles, man. Don't get off my side.
It's funny. I just went on a rant last week on the show about seatbelt laws and how stupid they are.
100% they are, but it's just one of those some people will take it a little bit too far, and then you get into that realm of hyperbole where it's just no one can take you seriously now, because while you might be using it as a rhetoric device, they're hearing it as you legitimately believe that it is exactly like this sometimes.
Yeah.
Seatbelt
laws should be the hyperbole, not what you're being hyperbolic about. I think, that's, I feel like it's when you're already talking to them and you're getting them to move a little bit on an issue that is similar, and whether it's the war on drugs or gun control or anything that's just about you and your body and your property. I always use it as what sounds kind of ridiculous, but is realistic and exists example. And then especially because we have New Hampshire without seatbelt laws to go off of, it's a great come around of like, what about this, and get them to just completely open up to the actual core libertarian principle. Because you can argue somebody and change their mind on, say, the war on drugs, and like have them chanting like, I should be able to put whatever I want in my body, but they just got convinced that on the war on drugs. They didn't actually get convinced to the liberty
thing. Yeah.
Right. So I like using seatbelt laws as the thing that pushes them a little bit further into that, to be like, oh, wow, yeah, even that's stupid. In New Hampshire, where they don't require that by law and don't put a gun to your head about it, more people still wear it just because it's a smart thing to do. Like, people are smart even if the government doesn't tell them to be smart.
Yeah. And again, like using those types of using those things as a argumentative device is absolutely, it's how you're able to frame things in people's minds to be able to make them have that conversation, have that convert, or even to look into things to a certain degree. For me, I just find that like sometimes people will take like, not so much take the issue too far, but they'll take the comparison like just too far apart, where if you're talking to someone who doesn't agree with you and you take the 2 seconds to put yourself in the shoes of that person, you realize you're going to lose them with those comparisons. Like there's some arguments that, and again, like my main thing is like bad messaging or bad arguments in the libertarian movement. It's one of the things I hate to see, because there's nothing worse for me than seeing a good idea argued for poorly. Because at that point, you can convince someone that it's a bad idea simply because it was presented poorly, right? I mean, a good example for that would be like for myself, at least, like maybe it's just because I'm in a different country here, I hate the constitutional argument for gun rights. I hate using that argument, because the argument should not be that this piece of paper that the government wrote tells you have rights. That is a horrible argument and a horrible precedent, because at that point, any piece of paper that the government writes is now what your rights are.
I just had Michael Bolden on the show last night, and he went off on that rant for a good 5 minutes about how much he hates the Second Amendment is my gun permit kind of rhetoric.
Oh yeah, it's so bad. It shows a surface level understanding of the actual concept of the rights. I mean, that's one of the things that I liked with Hayek. Hayek actually talks about, I mean, we're going on a bit of a tangent here, but Hayek talks about rights as a...
You can always tangent about Hayek on my show. Always.
Okay, good. A man of culture, I see.
I'm going to put my laptop
like he goes on with... oh.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. He goes on with social evolution of rights, in which case the rights that you have in a society, realistically, they're not, necessarily God-given. They're not going to be state-given. They're not going to be purely inherent or, the negative rights versus positive rights. That's just a category thing. His concept is that rights come from what society agrees upon by working together to reach these decisions that this is a right or this isn't a right. And then realistically, if you're raised in it, grown in it, et cetera, you're going to believe those things. For thousands of years, people all across the world thought that owning slaves was a right. If you had enough position or power, you had a right to own slaves. Last couple hundred years, we realized that's a bad idea. And that's not really the way that should work. Not every country's caught on just yet. There are some countries that still practice it. Like there's still a slave trade in Libya today, but...
Well, we owe that to Hillary Clinton and Obama.
Well, yeah. Less said about them, the better.
Right. What I was fucking around with my laptop was one of the stickers I have on here is a Man Crush Monday Hayek sticker.
Yes. Yep.
Hayek is Bay.
Yes. I still love those memes where it's pictures of Salma Hayek and then it's just
I just posted one of those like 2 days ago.
I love those.
And I got a couple comments of like, I love it when people just don't get it, and so many dumb comments.
Say that.
Oh my god! I posted one of those a while back, and I posted it into a group, and I don't remember which one it was, but it was like one of the slightly more toxic libertarian Facebook groups. I'm sure you're in
Probably.
it too, whichever one it is.
Ancom v ANCAP. Most likely that place is a cesspool. Anyway.
But I just threw that in there, and I got like at least 8 or 9 like just blatantly misogynistic comments of like, oh, we're supposed to listen to her because she has big boobs, like kind of shit. And I'm like, oh my god.
Fuck me. No.
No, you're supposed to listen to the words because they're smart, and to her because actually Selma Hayek isn't that unbased in all reality. And an added bonus, she has great boobs. Like it's just an added bonus, guys. Come on.
Yeah, you tally the pros and cons and you come out ahead. It's okay.
Right, exactly. So you've mentioned a couple times your book Bad Arguments. It's a very unique concept, and it's put together in a pretty unique way. So you've already kind of covered part of my question, which was like how you came up with it, because you've displayed your hatred for bad arguments. But how did you compile all that? What made you actually want to put it together into a book instead of just the article series that you were doing?
Well, the main thing for me was that I always like using explanation and example, right? Whenever I'm trying to explain any concept to someone, I'm not just going to say, okay, so this is how it works. It's more, this is how it works, and here's an example of it working. Therefore, you can actually see the mechanism in play. So for me, what I did was I took a series of the articles that I had published, mixed in some stuff that I had written up but hadn't decided to publish just as of yet, because I either wanted to change a few things or wanted to kind of like link it in with something else. So it's a mix of content that was previously published plus content that was brand new. And then I layered it through with basically 3 kind of breakdowns for argumentation. So understanding where you yourself are when it comes to the argument, because I find that that's a big weak point where people don't take a look at themselves on it or don't even understand where they're standing. Same thing like I mentioned earlier, where, you know, you can have 2 ideas, and if they don't agree, then you've got a problem, and you should work on that before you're jumping out there and trying to change people's minds and make them believe this, that, or the next thing, when the things you yourself believe don't necessarily mesh with each other, and you can be hit with those double-edged swords. So first part of it was kind of a couple of different articles going into specific arguments, like explaining what an ad hominem is, explaining the example of like one I love is the everyone is literally Hitler. I love that argument, and just like destroying it. It's great. But at the same time, also but you owe an iPhone argument that some people in our movement will use against people that are more on the left, considering how much government money they get and how much of the technology was previously defense owned. So it's just kind of like, that's a really poor argument for what you're talking about again. So first part is, again, a couple articles, then I explain that. Then I get into the actual, like, understanding who you're arguing against. So, you know, are they arguing because they truly believe and are rationally positioned against you from a different perspective? When you're arguing against them, are you arguing for the sake of changing their mind? Are you arguing because you have an audience and you want to change the audience's mind if you know you can't change your opponents? Are you doing it just to learn and have that interaction with someone who disagrees with you so you can bounce ideas back and forth and try to come to something closer to a truth for yourself? So just kind of understanding what that back and forth looks like, and also being able to read people that are going to be bad actors. Because some people, they'll argue tooth and nail strictly from a tribalistic perspective. Like, you say something bad about insert X politician here, and then all of a sudden that's just going to be the back and forth, and you're not really getting anywhere with that person. It's a waste of your time. And chances are the audience is their audience, and you're probably not going to convince those people either, because they're all part of their little group.
Right. So would you consider Twitter an audience in that, by that definition? Or is that like a sometimes maybe, where depending on who you're arguing with?
I mean, Twitter's a 50-50 sort of thing. I mean, you only have as much of an audience as you have followers between the two of you. If there's 2, 3, 4, however many people there, you're only going to have an audience based on how many people are actually seeing and interacting with the post and being able to go through the thread. And again, that comes down to basic time investment, right? Sometimes you can argue with someone on Twitter, and it might just be that they said something stupid, you're frustrated, and you just throw a line out there just as basically like a fuck off already, you're dumb. And sometimes that's all that's needed. That's just, you do that and then they lose their shit and then you point, laugh, and just have like jokes going back and forth while you're eating like, fried chicken and waffles.
It's my
and you're just,
favorite way to do
shit, right?
Twitter debates.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You can do that. Sometimes you might run into someone where you have an actual conversation with them and you can actually see, like, just in the way that they respond, you can start to kind of read like, okay, this person's actually listening or actually taking what I'm saying into consideration. Okay, change gears. This could go somewhere. Let's go to it. Sometimes you might be doing it just because you're waiting in a doctor's office and you're bored and you think that it'd just be really funny to screw with somebody. So you just hop on a CNN post and just watch them die as you share your opinion. But again, it comes down to knowing why you're getting involved in the first place. And then if you are there for the audience, you have to keep in mind the type of people that are there. So like, I know if, like when I'm in an argument with, say, like a group that has both people that are like anarcho-capitalist and people that are anarcho-communist, and I'm trying to argue a point from the capitalistic side, I know that if I just like hark in on how great property rights are, I'm going to lose all the ANCOMs in the group. They're just not going to listen. They're not going to care. They're just going to, chalk it up to, oh, I'm XYZ. Why don't you read late Rothbard and have a bad time? Like, it's just going to be like that. But
read late Rothbard and have a bad time.
Pretty much, right? But if I'm arguing with those people, then I'll use the perspective of, okay, so this idea works great because of how communities come together. This is how voluntarism can work. Here's how actually being able to do economic calculation, which is, you kind of need the capitalistic system to do that correctly. In order to be able to do that, to really make a mutual aid network come to fruition, to be able to identify those needs and action them. So this is where these concepts actually help, whereas your idea of reaching these ends will not, because it removes all the mechanisms required. And then I can use that argument to try to get them to think in, okay, well, the end goal that I want is everybody's going to have access to what they need and people are going to be more free, because that's, say what you will about ANCOMs, that's at the end of the day, realistically what they want. They might have their own
100%.
system for doing it, but that's the end goal. And the end goal on our side is pretty much the same way, but you have to talk to them completely different. If you just go in with hard, it's their property rights, this person deserves to be a billionaire because, government subsidies isn't part of the problem, et cetera, et cetera. Honestly, the amount of people that, to your audience that's out there, if there's any, for the people that are listening, if it's ever crossed your mind to do this, please don't. You do not need to simp for billionaires ever. You just don't. You can defend property rights without getting an Elon Musk tattoo. It's okay. You can do it. It's okay.
You can
to call
simp
out the
Elon
problems.
Musk for
Elon Musk,
for making his
Bezos is a better
car
example.
$69,420. That's one that you can. That's a reason to.
Oh,
simp
100%.
him, but not for
as a
being a
person, he's great
billionaire.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing with Elon Musk is that he's brilliant. He is brilliant.
Mhm.
His meme game is absolutely hilarious. I love watching people get upset about his words destroying or creating entire crypto portfolios. I love seeing that happen on Twitter back and forth. But on the flip side, you have to be honest about where he's at. Like, a lot of the money that he gets for his company does come from government subsidies that he does get for doing some of the green investment and the like. In a true like libertarian society, he's not going to have that. Would he be as successful without them? His parents literally owned apartheid era emerald mines. Kind of needs to come up every once in a while if we're talking about how great or how poor a person is, as an individual. Doesn't mean that overall the stuff he's doing isn't great. And it's also great to see someone at that position talking some of the talking points that he is and the kind of vision that he has. Absolutely great to see. But at the same time, you don't have to bend over backwards and almost, warp the things you believe in to try to defend the people simply because they're property owners.
Right.
That's the one side I find with a lot of, particularly with like not every type of capitalist, but particularly like a narco-capitalist. I find that there's a lot of argumentation that goes out there that they bend on things that they themselves believe in to try to just reinforce that these people are in the right simply because of the property owners. It's like, that's not going to change any minds. That's just going to make us look bad. Please stop. Get off my side.
Yeah, and the left very accurately calls us out. Because like I know that I was guilty of this mental standpoint for quite some time, and it got called out enough times that I finally realized what I was doing, and I still see it all the time. Is like, it's that I think that maybe someday I'll be a billionaire, so I can't attack them, because then, like, if I say billionaires shouldn't exist, then how am I ever going to become a billionaire?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be Bernie Sanders. I'd be a hypocrite. So they see bending on that little bit that they're bending on now, that we're critiquing them for, as not as bad as bending on the existence of billionaires once they become rich. But in reality, most of us are not going to become billionaires, right?
Yeah.
Like that's just
I
the
mean,
unfortunate
we might get there
reality.
just through inflation, but
fair. Good point. But yeah, most of us aren't going to get there. Maybe millionaire. You know, you're putting together some pretty promising business moves. I think that's not far-fetched to think, but the majority of us, especially those of us sitting online all day, working a minimum wage job and tweeting at lefties, you know, we're not going to become billionaires. And that I think that argumentation for like the American dream has bled into some of the libertarian ideologies and caused them to kind of mix up. And the American dream is dead. Like, we just need to realize that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, the closest thing that you see to the American dream, and I even, you know, not just necessarily the American dream, and again, I'll give the like strange foreigner perspective here since I'm from Canada, but even just like Western world in general, right? The ideas of how life is going to go, where you're going to land, and everything like that, the rug was pulled out easily a good 15 years ago, if not earlier. You know, the idea that, you know, do okay in high school, get degree, go get job in like middle of the pack, like office work. And then eventually you move up to a degree where you're going to have enough money to pay off your house, put your kids through college so they can go through the same repetitive cycle. And then you got enough money left over to semi-enjoy yourself after you retire.
Yep.
That whole process, that whole idea, or even the opportunity that, you know, if you are somewhat, you know, like an engineer of some sort, and you can put something together, you just have a good idea, and you can get a hell, nowadays you can get a 3D printer. I just, as a side thing, I completely thought when 3D printers kicked off that we would see a whole spring of inventions coming out. Really haven't seen too much of a difference. It's mostly just people making figurines or finding ways to make cheap versions of things they already have, and they just do it at home. But that's a little side
bit.
point.
I've seen a few things, but you're 100% right. I was thinking that we would see better, but
Okay. Yeah, like you were saying, though, going back to the main thing is, yeah, the dream of that happening is dead. And even if you do everything right and follow through on, you know, what society is telling you need to do in order to be successful, there's no guarantee. There's a lot more just luck involved, just period and full stop. There's just a lot more luck involved. And even if you go to the classic generational wealth concept, there are so many things that can just wipe that out in an instant, where you don't even have the security of being able to build on what your forefathers had built on for you, for your generation. You don't even have that kind of security anymore, because that can be eroded in an instant with 3 policy changes coming to fruition. I mean, you take a look at the 2008, the Great Recession, right? A lot of that was kicked into effect from policies back in the 90s. You know, there was no way. I mean, anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together could probably put it together that something bad was going to happen if that was allowed to persist as long as it was. And there was definitely signs of it far in advance. But at the same time, a lot of people weren't paying attention or saw the issue with that. So they planned everything by investing in index funds or individual companies and everything else. And then it came time to cash out and retire, and they just lost 3/4 of their life's work.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that can happen constantly with very little change because of how involved the government is in our economy at this point. They screw up the boom bust cycle, which just makes the booms and the busts larger than they need to be. So we end up with these artificial bubbles and these massive crashes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
we're seeing another one.
worse.
We're seeing another one with COVID that I think is waking. It's waking a lot more people up than 08 did. Also, I think we need to. I think we discredit a lot how much work 08 did to wake people up. We attribute a lot of that to like the Ron Paul campaign, but like Occupy Wall Street was huge, and those people didn't
massive.
go back. Like those people didn't vote for Biden this year. So huge opportunity there that I think we missed as a movement. But yeah, I think COVID is waking up a significantly more larger number of people because it's affecting a larger number of people. That, like you're saying, that Western dream of like just do good and you'll be fine. Like so many people who just checked all the boxes and did all their work are now fucked and like homeless or working at Walmart or Wendy's or something like that, and barely making do and getting paid $1,200 by the government, being like, "Oops, sorry, we ruined your life." And I don't think that those people are going to go back either to believing that like government can fix it all, because it can't. And once they fuck up your life like that,
it's kind of hard to, yeah. Well, the thing that's interesting with that too, and I mean, you're seeing it a bit in the States now. It's really bad up here. Is the quote unquote labor shortage that we're having. There's a massive, and you're seeing it in certain parts in the States as well, where people are getting the money from the government right now. I mean, this is the best test case for UBI that we've ever seen. Realistically, it's an accidental test case for it. But like up here, we have, keep in mind, Canadian dollar is not worth quite as much. It's about 75 cents to the dollar, give or take, for the US. So keep that in mind with the numbers I throw out. But effectively, right now, if you are off work for whatever reason, you're getting about $2,000 a month, give or take. I mean, it's not like a massive quantity of money, but mathematically, it works out that if you are making, like, once they take the tax off it, it works out to $1,800. So if you are making less than $1,800 a month net from your job, it is not worth having, save maybe just for being able to say you remained employed for the sake of, moving up or keeping that on your resume. But from a money perspective, it's just not worth it. So we're starting to see businesses respond and raise their own wage. Or like the government's pushing through a higher minimum wage up here. They're pushing through the $15 as well, which granted it's not the same as the state's putting through the 15, because up here that would require them putting through 20, but they're putting through that minimum wage push. But the businesses were already increasing their wages to try to draw people in, because what's the point of working part-time and, and going home with, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500, even as a college kid, when you can just say, yeah, I'm working age, and why work when I could just be handed the money? So, I mean, you don't see that in a lot of the quote unquote, like real jobs, as it were. Like, you're not seeing that issue in trades. You're not seeing that issue in offices. You're not seeing that issue in any of that sort of stuff, at least up here. But retail food services, the very people that, that all of this like Fite 15 stuff and everything else has been like striving to try to help. Those are the same people that, now that they're getting the money direct from the government, are just not working. So, but at the same time, when you start to see, like, I saw an advertisement for McDonald's in the States. I want to say it was in Ohio. It came up like just as a meme on Facebook, but it was like a legitimate sign because I looked into it. They were offering like $22 an hour to work full time at McDonald's. Yeah, and it's just kind of like, it's
one of the best arguments against minimum wage raising. Like, the market can do it without the government getting involved. Like, I don't really know anyone in New York that's paying minimum wage right now, at least upstate. Because minimum wage up here, I think it's like $11.50 or something like that. I haven't worked minimum wage in a while. I don't remember, but yeah, and everyone's paying about 15 to 18 starting. The city, it's the minimum wage is 15 and everyone's paying about 18 to 20. And the thing I've noticed is in a bunch of cities around here, what you said about the real jobs isn't true. We're seeing the labor shortage there significantly too. Not nearly as significant as the retail and food service and kind of those kinds of jobs, but also we're not getting $2,000 a month. We got 1,800 total spread out this entire time. Unemployment was a thing, and it was slightly easier to get for some people, and it was larger for a little while, but that's gone now. So we don't actually have that. But what I have noticed in the States is like the quote unquote gig economy has boomed. So a lot of people realized that they can deliver for Uber Eats and make more money than they made at their full-time office job where they had to just sit at a desk for 9 hours a day and just have no life and have like dull fucking lights. And they can go out and be doing things and set their own schedule and like spend more time with the kids and whatnot. And so that's what I actually attribute a lot of it in the States to, just because we don't really have as much of the communism as you guys do.
You're not
but
wrong.
I see that as
You're not
great. Like, I love the fact that we're heavily more entrepreneurial and like work like independent contractor based economy in the US right now. And it's really fucking over the people that have treated their employees like shit. Like, economically, I know that a worker shortage is a bad thing, and it's probably gonna be a problem here soon, and it's like something that like we should be worried about. But as a worker, as a 24-year-old person who's worked retail, food service, and all of these shitty jobs in the past, I'm like, fuck yeah. I'm loving watching some of these McDonald's close down, all these signs of like, sorry, we're short staffed. We don't have blank. We don't have a drive through today or whatever the fuck. I'm honestly loving seeing that because, for years and years and years, we heard, well, if you want to be treated better, if you want a better job, if you want more pay, go do something else. And then people are fucking doing that, and everyone's pissed. And then the other thing that I love, which is really tribalistic, and it's one of the most tribalistic opinions that I have right now, is there was a bunch of those Karens that were like, oh, if they pay McDonald's workers $15 an hour, I'm gonna quit my difficult job and just go fucking work at McDonald's. And we saw a bunch of them lose their quote unquote difficult jobs. And now with the worker shortage, McDonald's is paying $15 an hour. And they're like, oh, I'm going to go work at McDonald's. And the amount of times I've gone into a McDonald's this year, because I've been in probably 16 or 17 states so far this year. The amount of times I've gone into one and it's just like a bunch of noob, untrained, have no idea what the fuck they're doing, like 40, 50, 60 something year old women that they're trying to be nice, but they're not. And they're just fucking everything up. And their managers are just like, oh my God, what the fuck? I'm kind of loving that too, because I'm like, you guys didn't realize how difficult working at McDonald's really fucking is.
Yep. Like, and that's the thing too, right? I mean, the thing that I love with it is, one, I love people actually seeing the kind of work that goes into those jobs. Like, to loop it back over to like Musk when it comes to like the pay thing, like I agree with what he says, where people get paid not based on the amount of work that they do, they get paid for the difficulty of the problems they solve.
Yes.
I like that approach. I definitely agree with it. It explains a lot with certain price setting and things like that, because you know what? Some of the jobs that require the hardest amounts of work pay the shittiest. They pay the absolute worst sometimes. The only only examples that go aside are certain trades jobs where, if they have like the right unionization or whatever else, and they've kind of like forced those wage points up, then that's fine. But like for a lot of places, especially retail food services, they get screwed as far as the like effort to income ratio is concerned. But you see, this is the thing that's interesting with it too. And you mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit, and that's something that I like here.
Mm-hmm.
Like one thing that I always try whenever the concept of labor or anything like that comes up from the worker perspective, I always like to explain it to people by saying, you don't work for a company, you work for yourself. You are your own company in this case. You sign a contract with this other company to exchange your labor and expertise for access to their systems and money.
Mm-hmm.
They give you the access. You make product, whether it's, intellectual product, punching through spreadsheets, tracking reports, flipping burgers, serving coffee, whatever it is that you do, you trade labor and expertise in exchange for, they give you the access to the place that does it, and then they give you money for having exchanged your labor and expertise.
Yeah.
If you go into these labor conversations with your employer, and I say this where in my day job, I'm a manager, and I like to see this from people who apply for me. If you go into the job and you treat it as if you are there for you, and you are trying to treat the company less like your employer and more like a client,
Mm-hmm.
if you have that mentality about you when you're going into these labor conversations, it's going to change the tone, not of just how the interview goes, but it's going to change the tone of how labor works. The more people view their own labor as they are working for themselves, they happen to do it with X company instead of I work for them, so they just, they're in charge of all that, et cetera, et cetera. The more people start to realize that that's closer to how it actually works, then the better the labor movement in general is going to be, which means we're going to have better conditions, better pay. Employers are going to have better employees. It's not just going to be a one-sided thing where it's just, workers of the world unite, break your chains, yada, yada, yada. It's not going to just be like that side of things. It's going to be like a better system for everyone involved, because people will have that investment back. People are going to actually try again. Because if you have your own client, you try a lot harder than if you have a guaranteed paycheck, no matter how much effort you put in. It's just the nature. Yeah. It's just human nature. You're going to put that effort in. So they get better employees. You have better control of how you're doing things. And we're also starting to see with people basically saying, fuck it, I'm not doing that job. Well, we're starting to see it change with the market raising the actual labor costs. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, a lot of companies, we're seeing a bit of it reflected in the inflation rate right now, but for the most part, a lot of the companies are just eating the cost because they know that they can't jack the price as quickly as they want to recoup the new labor costs. They're just literally letting it eat out of their profits because they know they have to if they want to stay afloat.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of them can afford that and have been pretending like they couldn't. And then others have been loudly saying they can. Like Walmart is one of the highest donors to the Fight for 15. Like they're like, yeah, we could afford to pay you guys that much, but we're going to make the government tell everyone else to do it so it kills our competition before we actually do it. Because it's only worth it to us if it kills competition.
Yep.
But yeah, and I've had the benefit of going kind of back and forth between W-2 and 1099 kind of, well, I don't know. You don't know those forms. I'm sorry. Employer versus. Okay.
Yeah.
Employer versus
different terminology
contractor.
up here, but I've got the idea. Yeah, I know them.
So I've been an independent contractor many times in my adult life. And so I've had that experience and kind of breaking down that kind of employer mentality that a lot of people have. I think you're 100% right. And that's why I'm so excited about this, is because the more people that understand that the time equals money perspective is a little bit misconstrued, I think. We can change how much our time is worth. Right. It's 100%. Not just whatever we're told it's worth. It's not my week is worth this much, or it's the other way around. It's not like X hourly. It's like my week is worth X dollars to me. I need this much money. I'd like to have this much more. How can I do that? And there's so many fucking ways to do that, whether it's driving for DoorDash or it's getting another part-time job or, it's tutoring online. There's just so much fucking stuff that you can do. Yeah. And I'm really excited that a lot of people have kind of found that and been able to break out of this mold, because I think that one of the things libertarians preach more than anybody else is decentralization, right? And that's not just about government. The workforce has so much to do with that too. And the more we decentralize the workforce, the better people are going to understand economics.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's a lot involved on that side of things that, again, this ties back to just libertarian messaging in general. There's a lot of that I find gets lost because, like a lot of people in the libertarian movement, I mean, not everybody, that we do have like a lot of people in the libertarian movement that do lean left on their economics, at least on their economic side. Just like we have some people that are purely anarchy, some people that are like semi-state, like the Night Watchman state minarchists, or just people that are just good old-fashioned classic liberals. It's the same thing with the economic side, where we have people that are like across the scale, but on the whole, the liberty movement usually leans towards capitalism, or at least some form of market economy where property rights are still upheld.
Yep.
With that said, one of the worst things that we come across, and this is one that always drives me up the wall, is how many people fight against the concepts of unions. The amount of people in the liberty movement that are like anti-union on this stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. In my opinion, if there shouldn't be special protections for unions. I know that one's going to sound strange and probably get anybody that's in a union to get the back up a little bit, but there shouldn't be any special protections for unions from the government, just like there shouldn't be any special protections for businesses from the government. The government should not be involved in our economy, period, and full stop. That's just where that line should go. But at the same time, collective bargaining is a thing. In a lot of cases, especially with how certain companies have been able to build up, it needs to continue to be a thing in order to help bring back that balance that was skewed by the government involvement in our economy. It's the ultimate goal, like no matter how we get about it, is that we need people on our side. So when you go after people for, doing what they can to survive, like when I see people in liberty movement going after people like, oh, you're perpetuating the system because you're on welfare. It's like, no, that dude's on welfare because he's got 3 kids to feed. And because he got arrested for pot like 6 years ago, he can't get a job. That's why he's on welfare. You can't blame the guy. Like that'd be like saying, and this is an example of using a metaphor that is way out of line for it, like we talked about before. But that'd be like calling someone Pol Pot because they use a public library. Like, I mean, it's just, it's like
hypocrite.
You bastards.
But yeah.
But it's the same kind of concept where
I have heard people argue against using the public library, though. That's an argument that I have gotten into with people in person, not even just on the internet.
Yeah, and you see, and this is the thing too with it, is it's one of those things that gets argued against because people see it as, oh, you use a public library, therefore you are creating a need for that service, therefore you are perpetuating the government using the service, et cetera, et cetera. I get the argument there, except it ignores one key thing. My money was already spent on it. My money was already spent on the roads. My money was already spent on police departments and fire departments. What am I supposed to do? My house burns down. I don't call somebody, or I have to make sure I have a private contractor number to call to put the fire out on my house if my house catches fire. Like, you can't judge someone for participating in a system and then call them a hypocrite simply because they're against the system. It's kind of hard to be against the system if you've never participated in it in the first place, or if you've never been involved or understand how it works. I mean, no one way, it's an overused line, but it's true. We live in a society. It is a thing. I hate the line. It gets overused. It's terrible. If I have to see one more Jared Leto photo, they don't even use the proper Phoenix photo, but that's beside the point.
Oh my god!
Oh, I know.
Actually,
it's a horrid line. I hate it.
I used
But-
that line in an argument over the weekend, and I physically cringed at myself.
Yeah. It's painful to have that go out, but I mean, the thing that I'm saying with it here is that, you know, we already have society built up. We already have these systems in place. We already have all of these things going on. So to try to make this argument where you can't participate in it, otherwise you are automatically a hypocrite. You know, it's like it'd be like saying that you're against cruelty against coffee farmers, but you still drink coffee, therefore you're a terrible person. It's like, well, that's not necessarily how it works. I mean, you could be against like massive corporations doing this, that, and the next thing to the planet and take the super environmental approach. Well, good luck with that, because 99.98% of all brands are run by the same like 9 companies. So good luck dodging them. You know, there's only so much that you can do on that. And like, obviously you can take certain like direct ethical approaches to try and direct action to being able to separate yourself from those choices. But at the same time, like, these things exist. You're going to need the service. The fact that, especially in the case of state provided, the fact that you need to use the state provided service doesn't invalidate the argument against that service existing. If anything, it reinforces it by saying that the government does not allow an alternative option. Like for the library thing, I agree that there shouldn't be government-run libraries, but I still think that people as a whole would still want a public library of some sort after the fact. Like, even if you were to completely get rid of government, get rid of all additional services, et cetera, I think people in communities would still band together and say, yeah, we should have a place where we've got books for people to just read. It should still be a thing because it's a good concept. Same thing like having a fire department. Same thing like having some form of, you know, property right enforcement other than just 2 people shooting at each other constantly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those services and ideas that, yeah, okay, it's government run, but it doesn't mean that the service itself is a bad idea.
Right, and libraries are actually a really good example of that because they were originally privately owned and operated. Almost all of them, especially, or at least in the U.S. I don't know if Canada had the same kind of startup with their libraries, but in the U.S., like, they're all, even like the New York library, the one right there, like Bryant Park, like big, huge, beautiful building, that was privately funded. It was privately built and then turned over to the city because they were like, the city kind of wants to run this and do a thing. We're going to let them do it. And at the time, putting myself in their shoes, I probably would have handed it over to the city too, because we're talking like the mid 1800s. Government really wasn't awful, and the city wanted to do a cool thing, and they did a good thing with it. Like, it's a great library. It was run really well, especially back then. But like, that was just a combination of a bunch of people's private collections and a gigantic like inheritance and like being written into a couple different people's wills, and then boom, there's like almost $1 million in 1820 something to build that building. And most of the rest of the libraries, at least like in the New York area, like upstate here, were funded by Andrew Carnegie. Like, you know, it was just, that's how it was for so fucking long. The government was just like, you know what, we're gonna take over that thing. Nobody really fought them, and now everyone thinks that we can't do it without them. Yeah,
I mean, it's the same thing like policing, right? Like, one of the things I was involved with was the movie with Stateless Productions, Monopoly on Violence, right? I was actually a writer and partial narrator for it, but it's the same idea. Like, people forget that previously policing was private.
Yeah.
It was a private concept before it was a state concept. It didn't become like, what was policing before was effectively what security guards are now. And then eventually it turned into an actual modern police force in the UK, but that didn't really take place until the 1800s. Like, the idea of policing is a really modern concept, and yet somehow we always had some form of, you know, social rules and a way of punishing violators and people who would help with the enforcement of that so that there was some form of fairness. These concepts continue to exist and can continue to exist after we remove the state from these institutions. Like the thing, like there's a lot of people, particularly people that really push on the concept of anarchy, that don't really understand that in a like perfect anarchist system, things would look a lot alike to how they are now. You're not going to have everything burnt down to the ground and everybody has to farm for themselves to survive. And, you know, it's the idea is that you have the choice to do that. You have the ability to do that. But a lot of the like advancements of society are not going to just disappear. And this includes the social advancements that we have. So this includes different institutes that we've built up over time. This includes the development of healthcare. This includes the complex systems of trade that we've developed, not just internally in each of our own countries, but also internationally and between countries. Same thing for some of the regulations that we've set on education, for example. A similar thing to those regulations are likely to exist. We used to do that way back in the day through the form of guilds and trade associations. I mean, one of the best examples of self-regulation is the comic book industry. Comic book industry back in the day, they were at risk of having government censorship and government regulation. So they said, no, we've got this. And then they came together and basically created a guild, and they set their own regulations, which is why you end up with concepts like the original Batman concept, where he quite literally, like, parents die, horrific murder, he grows up to beat up criminals, and it turned campy as all hell once you got into the 50s and 60s. Exact same idea, but that was self-induced because they saw the opportunity to self-regulate. Same thing can happen with just about any other industry. You don't need to have that, government oversight to step in, just so long as it's done in an open way where everyone can see it. I know this one, obviously everyone runs around talking about this one with blockchain technology, but I think that that's an awesome concept for it. It doesn't just have to be like a stock game, because let's be honest, a lot of people don't treat crypto with a way that it could be treated as a decentralized currency, which is a phenomenal thing. They just treat it as something interesting to put in their portfolio and like seeing it spike up and down, knowing that eventually they're going to make money on it down the road if they wait 5 years. But the idea of blockchain technology as a registrant system, that is an excellent way to publicly broadcast the standards and dealings of different companies and different industries. It's a great way to replace the concept of IP law, because you can actually, like we're seeing with NFTs now, you can actually log exactly when you created something. And sure, people can steal it, copy it, et cetera, but at the end of the day, you can go back and say, no, that's mine. Which for most artists is really just about the credit of getting those people to come back to them and look into their work and actually support the original artist. Because I can hit click and write save to just about anything on the internet, so most of the other stuff really doesn't matter as far as IP law is concerned. But
yeah,
like
and that's the important part.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. But yeah, I 100% agree that we really we do kind of take that kind of stuff for granted. And I know this is an entirely hypocritical rant that I'm about to go on, because I also don't use this kind of stuff correctly. But yeah, a lot of these things are what we've been waiting for as a movement. Like the ability to do a lot of the stuff that we talk about and put our shit into practice, that exists now with crypto, with NFTs, with blockchain technology, with open source technology. Like there's just so much stuff that we can do. And if we utilized it correctly, we can show people that this shit works without government. But that comic book thing is a great example, and all the nerds that watch this show are gonna greatly enjoy that. I think my audience is almost exclusively nerds. So before we started the show, we were talking a little bit about the podcasts and your podcast, and you said you were taking a break because you didn't have the time to put in the work to keep it up to snuff. And so, like I said, I want you to kind of explain what, in your opinion, is up to snuff, and why you think that putting out subpar content isn't worth it.
Well, for me, I find, and this is, I mean, a part of me is just I'm a perfectionist with this stuff. Like, as far as like the audio quality and stuff like that, that stuff I'm fine on. I can make that work. That's all fine and dandy. But the actual content itself, right? The last thing I'd want to do is put out just, another like generic white dude talking liberty kind of thing. Like, there needs to be something that's a unique angle to it. There needs to be something that's interesting to listen to, something that's a little more in-depth content wise. So for that, like a lot of the stuff, the podcast was Coffee Shop Philosophy. In that podcast, I would talk about things like an actual in-depth look at the Dunning-Kruger effect, or how we have actual limitations in our mind for social cohesion, which leads to tribalism, which is transferred from kin groups into political groups and ideology groups, which helps explain some of the evolution of the political landscape over the last 100 years. So like, not really just the 101 stuff that you hear over and over and over again whenever you come across like another liberty focused podcast, where it's just kind of it's the same like three looking people, not even the same people, but the same three people that look the same, and they're all sitting there like, yeah, so there's this thing called taxes, it's bad, okay? You're having that same conversation over and over and over again, where it's like and that's the thing too, is like sometimes, like, even when I look at people that have like a lot of episodes to their name, a lot of the time when they're going through it, sometimes they'll come right back to topics that they've already talked about, but they're not rehashing it and adding new information. They're literally just saying it again because they've somehow come full circle on all their talking points, just this time with a new guest. Like, for me, I don't like putting out the 101 stuff. I want to put out the 202 stuff, like where we're actually getting into something that's a little more heady or a little more interesting, but still positioning it in a way where people can understand it, right? Like, sometimes I would include just like certain life advice things, because an important part of the liberty movement that people really forget is the self-management aspect, right? Like, it's sort of like the idea that you're going to have better democracy if more people vote, which makes absolutely no sense, because if they're not involved in politics already, then how would they be better voters if they didn't care to vote before? So just kind of driving them out doesn't really help democracy at all.
Right.
On the flip side, like, having a purely libertarian system where you have people who are expected to be more active participants in their own lives, because they have to make choices that the state was making for them previously. They have to make decisions on, which services for fire prevention they're going to purchase, instead of having like a state mandated version that's going to come down and do it for you, and coming out of a bill that already exists for you, et cetera, for all the other concepts we already know about for that. By having to be an active participant in your own life in these aspects, a lot of people are not up for that, or not equipped to be able to do that. So learning some of those self-mastery things is, I find, a very under-discussed bedrock of the liberty movement in general. It's an aspect that, we'll talk about all these changes politically, but if people themselves are not equipped or ready to be able to live a life like that absolute freedom demands of you, ironically, the whole thing will fall apart, and it will become the very dystopia that we've spent so much time explaining that it won't become. But it really comes down to how equipped your average people are. That's a whole other thing, and I can touch back to that in a minute. But to go back to the podcast itself, if I'm not able to put out the kind of content and devote the time to it, to do some of the back research and different things like that, to really give content that's worth listening to, that you're not going to automatically come across in one of the hundreds of other info streams that you have coming in from other sources, or other sources with larger audiences, then there's not really much of a point for it on my end, right? Like, I'm not going to talk about something that Dave Smith or Tom Woods has already covered, because chances are anyone I would have an audience for would have already heard it, and they would have heard it from someone who either has more of a background, or, like in Tom Woods' cases, actually has an economics degree and can speak to it in a lot more detail. It would just be me, I would be the Cole's Notes version. There's not really much of a point in that, right? So that's what I mean when I say bring it up to snuff. Like, I think one thing that a lot of libertarian or just liberty-oriented content producers make as a mistake is the idea that they just need to put content out there, and so long as it's liberty flavored, it'll work. And that'll work to a degree for certain basic things, especially if you can latch on to like certain news items. Like if you start pumping out Rittenhouse memes right now, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, does it actually do anything for the movement, or does it just get people who like 9 other pages just like yours to like yours as well? That's the thing for it for me, is I'm always looking for ways to reach people who aren't libertarian.
Yeah.
Because I know the libertarians are already on my side. I need to talk to somebody else.
Yeah, and I think you could kind of ride those trains with podcasting. Maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was easy to kind of do that. Just pump out libertarian content and get people to watch what you were saying. Now there's so freaking many of them. It's like it's really not the same. Like meme pages and stuff, you can still kind of just get popular on Liberty Twitter or Liberty Facebook and have a good time, get 50, 60,000 followers and just have fun. But yeah, the podcasting world, that's not really a thing anymore. And so I don't really do any outreach with this show. I'm not trying to reach out to people who aren't libertarians. I know that I don't, but I do hound the same points over and over and over again with various guests, but I feel like they're points that aren't covered as much on other shows. For me, what I want to do is have people on who are doing awesome shit and have them tell the people who are watching how they got into doing that awesome shit and how the people watching could do that awesome shit. And therefore, maybe more people in the liberty movement do awesome shit. That's the end goal.
And that's an angle. Right. And that's an angle. That's instead of just talking the same stuff over and over again, you're presenting it in a way of, okay, here's the awesome stuff, but here's also how to apply the awesome stuff. Here's how to actually get it out there. Here's how to make things happen with the awesome stuff. Here's people who have done it, and here's different angles on it. You see, and that's sort of what I'm talking about, where there's a lot of the podcasts out there that don't have that kind of angle to them, where it's going to turn into an actual action, or it's going to educate someone on the outside. Like when I say outreach to other people, that's just my own preference. There's a lot of things that I think people in the liberty movement could still hear about libertarianism. Myself, I remember it's the funniest thing too. I came across someone who was a self-proclaimed former ANCOM who had gone like full, I don't know how they made this jump, but they went like full hop. Like they were like really into the idea of like Hobbes' view on like commune communities and stuff like that, and being able to shut out undesirables and all that. I don't know how they made that jump, but when I was talking to this person,
all right,
they, as a former ANCOM, had never read The Conquest of Bread. And I'm thinking to myself, that's like saying that you've never read Das Kapital and trying to call yourself a communist. It just doesn't work. Like you read a pamphlet at once, and that was your ideology, really. And it's the same thing with some people in the liberty movement, where they know the liberty movement just through talking heads, or they know it through memes, or they just know it through they already hated the government and found other people that were like them, so it's got to be good. Meanwhile, you drop any name, like the amount of people that are like self-proclaimed like libertarian anarchists that I've never heard of, like Lysander Spooner. If you ever want to hear that guy, if you ever want to hear an argument against the post office, just look him up. He's great.
Oh yeah,
but he was also like
all my filmmates hate the post office.
But
it's funny. I was actually just talking about Lysander Spooner tonight on the phone with my friend Reed Coverdale, because I was admitting to him that I've never actually read any of his full works. I've read a fuck ton of quotes, been quoted like different, like I've read different like full sections of some of his writing, but I've never actually just read a full essay of his. And it's on my to-do list right now. I'm reading The Law by Frederick Bastiat, and
good book.
After that, it's End the Fed by Ron Paul, and then I'm going to try to find a copy of Anarchist Handbook, but Malice's book.
Yeah. And you see, that's one of the things too, is, and I always say this as just a bit of
It wouldn't be a Liberty podcast without technical difficulties, would it, folks? Hold on. All right. I don't know where Killian went. Again, wouldn't be a Liberty podcast without technical difficulties. So I'm going to take this time to talk about how awesome Being Libertarian is and tell you guys that it was one of the first libertarian meme pages that I ever followed when I first joined the party. And Killian is gone. All right. Well, we were coming up on time. We'll see if he jumps back in to wrap up. But again, go to beinglibertarian.com, also killianhobbs.com. Both of those links are in the description. There we go. And we're back.
There we go.
Hello.
Right, that was a weird crash. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know if that was my internet connection or what. That was strange. Sorry about that.
You are all good. I was telling the viewers it wouldn't be a libertarian podcast without technical difficulties. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
I swear I'm on Muddied Waters Media with Spike and Matt, and I just don't know it because my internet has just hated me ever since I met them. Just gonna blame it entirely on Spike.
I was gonna say Spike just pulling some sorcery just to like keep your show down. That's all.
He's aiming the space laser directly at my house whenever I'm live because I'm competing with their shows. All right. So tell people how they can look into both Being Libertarian, Think Liberty, and yourself in general, how they can get involved with any of them, and how and then, well, actually, I'll save the third half of that question for after you answer those.
Sure. So, honestly, if you're looking to follow any of the stuff I do, I mean, honestly, on my Facebook page, I only do the Facebook. I don't do the, I don't have like an official like Twitter account thing set up. I prefer to lurk on Twitter just to see some of the stuff people are doing, occasionally comment there, but not really like a major like posting thing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you can always check me out on Facebook, Killian Hobbs -author. Obviously, Being Libertarian, you can go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I think we're on Steam and Mine still. Whole bunch of different avenues there. You'll be able to see content from us. Website, you'll see it scrolling at the bottom there, beinglibertarian.com. For Think Liberty, definitely check out the Twitter page. The stuff that Lonnie posts to our Twitter page is absolutely hysterical. And then obviously still our Facebook page, just Think Liberty. As far as myself, just like I said, Killian Hobbs author. Most of the stuff I write, I will post through, usually through Being Libertarian anyway. So if you're looking for some of my content, you can find it there, or hand over that nice hard-earned cash from the labor spike increases and buy my book. But have to do the plug. It's one of those things.
Yes.
I feel dirty every time I do it, but it's beside the point. Things to check out definitely though are voluntarism action. Like I said, they do absolutely amazing work. So you head over to Facebook, give them a like, and if you see a cause that pulls at your heartstrings, definitely help out there. And then obviously the guys over at Stateless Productions, they do have the movie Monopoly on Violence out. You can get it on Amazon or still view it back on YouTube there. Mm-hmm. You get a better version if you view it through Amazon there, of course. And then they are working on, they've got other film projects that are on kind of the go as well that they're working on, which is good to see. As far as getting involved, really, it's a matter of, it's like getting involved in anything. Take a look at what you're good at or what your, approach is, and then just start messaging people, start finding a way to have that contact. If you're good at getting people together, then, read into what mutual aid networks look like and try to organize something like that in your community amongst people. And then while you're doing that, show them that this is a solution that's alternative to the ways that government would handle this or fails to handle this. If you are really good at, if you're really good at creating like macro images, start a meme page, start getting the content out there, get in contact with people through it, and then start finding ways to spread the message and work with other people. If you're a great writer, go to beinglibertarian.com/contribute and send us an article, or any of the other fine, reputable sources out there for your libertarian reading needs. But
do it through Being Libertarian. Don't be that nice.
yeah, you're Canadian. Sorry.
I had a joke on a podcast last week on election day where someone mentioned invading Canada, and I was like, they'd just be like, "Ooh, sorry," which I'm sure is a joke you've heard plenty of times.
Oh, 100%, 100%. It's okay. I get my feelings checked out for free though, so it balances.
There we go. So other than going to beinglibertarian.com and clicking contribute, what would you tell to other people who have a gift in writing or like long form content creation that want to do more with their work than just echo chamber circle jerking?
Well, I mean, a good example of that, if I had to take a shot in the dark, other than just kind of plugging like Champion Books or something like that again, I always like looking at the guys behind the Tuttle Twins, for anyone that's heard of them. So they're people that actually write like a children's books that talk about liberty ideals, and they sell it just as a general, like, children's reading, and they try to push it to all audiences, not just focused on libertarian audiences. That's a great example of, getting the message out there in a way, and especially getting it out to like the younger generations before a lot of the pro-state ideas like really sink in and just become like standard thinking for them. Other examples, contribute an article to your local paper, do a write-up for a town hall meeting where, your city or your county or whatever else is discussing something. Show up. A lot of the time it comes down to just simply showing up and being willing to put the work in. Sometimes it can be a one-shot thing where you just jump in, you do what you need to do, and then you back out for however long until the next thing comes up that you want to be involved in. Other times it becomes like it becomes like a passion, and it becomes a thing that you're doing constantly. For like going back to long form writing specifically, you can publish your own books through Amazon and start to market it. You can start your own blog to put different ideas out there. Just make sure you got a good niche like angle that you're going at to be able to draw people in, because Google's algorithm is a motherfucker. It's fucking bad. It's painful. There's self-publishing, there's blogging, there's social media with long text posts, there's sending in articles to your local paper, to opinion groups. You can get something that's kind of in the middle if you don't want to do a lot of setup and just make an account on Medium. There's a bunch of opportunities like that to put those contents and ideas out there. Now, the question is how to be successful with them, making it unique, making it something that people want to read, and not just a rehash of something that people have already read, is a major component to really drawing people in on that. Making sure it's something that they're going to understand. It's not just, incohesive, pure stream of consciousness thought gibberish. Like, take the time to actually read it out loud to see how you sound. If you sound like you should be in a straitjacket, then you probably need to edit. It sounds like it's the best editing advice that I can give to anyone out there who wants to write. Read your own work out loud. Don't read it the way it's written. Read it the way that it's written, with all of the, commas that are either excessive or too few, with the weird spacing, with the weird like paragraph breakdowns you've got. Read it out loud. You will catch 99% of your own errors and be able to find a way to clean it up and make it sound better just by actually hearing it. But other than that, it's really just, like I said, it's a willingness. It's get out there. Eventually you'll come across someone who's got a slightly like larger reach or larger audience than you, and then you just latch onto that person like a lamprey. It's you start to talk to those people, and then they talk to other people, and then eventually, you get involved with a bunch of other people that are doing great things, and it all kind of works itself up. It's all through, I've never had something that I've been involved in that I've become involved in solely because of like my reputation as XYZ. It's never been the case for me. I always get involved in things because I've had a conversation with somebody. I've shared ideas. I've shown them, these are the things I think. This is the way that I operate. These are, some of the skills that I have and the way that I like to apply them. And it's really through that just kind of networking that I've had the opportunities I've had to get involved with Think Liberty, which then turned into being involved with Being Libertarian, which then turned into an editor-in-chief position with Being Libertarian and their publishing house, which turned into doing the narration and the writing for Monopoly on Violence, which then turned into some writing work I'm doing on their next movie, which then turned into being on guest appearances on certain podcasts and working behind the scenes with other people in the Liberty movement and helping them with some of the writing or just outreach and cross-connecting people. And ultimately,
all that led up to you being a guest on this great podcast.
And honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure, minus the slight little comment at the beginning about being Canadian. Outside of that, you've dropped his name a couple times, and that was specifically for the benefit of the wonderful man that is Lonnie Dupree. I had to. I hope he watches us. I hope he sees that. I absolutely love that man.
So when we were supposed to do the show a couple weeks ago, he retweeted it and was like, "Ew, a Canadian." I was like, so I had to throw that in there for him. And
I always like to remind him that because for him himself, he's Acadian down in Louisiana there. I always like to remind him that we kicked them out. And he really does not like knowing that. It's like that little trump card in the back pocket. It's like telling Americans we burned down the White House. It's just one of those and that kind of stops the conversation there. It's a little little snapback. It's fun.
See, I'm one of those Americans that think that's based.
Right? I mean, granted, I think the house was pink at the time, but there was it was a different color
about
before
that.
They actually went
It
with the
was
full
a different
White
color.
House. Yeah.
Huh.
Strange history thing.
With that random thought, thank
Random
you so
knowledge.
much, Killian, for coming on. This was fantastic.
Hey, thank you for having me. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. I love talking about this sort of stuff. If you ever have it down the road and you're looking to have me on again, I'm more than happy to come back. It's been great. I guess this last thing that I'll throw out there for people that are trying to piece together the random tangents that I've gone on in the course of this. Final words. Fuck the state. But that's honestly about it. No. But yeah, no, it's been there's really not that much else that needs to be said. But yeah, no, thank you again for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, like this video, click the subscribe button, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're also streaming on Free Speech Media on Facebook, Trovo, Float, DLive. And so go follow us on all the platforms. Some of the audio stuff is up on your podcast streaming platforms, but I'm a little bit behind, so that'll get updated soon. We'll be back here tomorrow night with Clint Russell from Liberty Lockdown, so tune in then. Until then, keep up the fight.